Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. I have to say hello to both sides of the Atlantic, of course, as I know we've got professionals tuning in from London, California, New York, and other areas. I'm Anton Blades, Associate Director at Fraser Jones, and of course, I'm thrilled and very excited to be hosting this session alongside my colleague Brad Law, who is Managing Director and Head of North America at Fraser Jones. As you'll know, we've got a great discussion ahead of us to talk through mastering HR tech and data across borders, a global webinar. We're running this webinar today for a couple of reasons. One, because it's obviously extremely relevant. Global HR systems is on the tip of everybody's tongue. And I think that's whether you're a HRIS professional or not. Actually, it's the generalist, operational, and strategic HR professionals that have just as much keen interest in this topic, which is really exciting because you can kind of really feel that in the market. It's quite palpable. I think as organizations scale internationally, something becomes very clear. It's that HR technology is the engine room of HR. So today we're diving into what it really takes to run those systems, implement those systems, and eventually to manage global HR analytics at a global scale without drowning in complexity. So before we get started, let me introduce our fantastic speakers. We have Samia Usala, who is the global head of HRIS, HR data and analytics at the Oscar-winning visual effects company Framestore. And then we have Clayton Firmino, who is Director, Global HRIS, People Analytics at iRhythm Technology, who are a pioneer in cardiac medical devices. With more than 30 years of experience combined, I'm genuinely delighted to hear from both of our experts. We've got our agenda today, which is global HRS strategy, implementation strategy and vendor selection, global reporting and insights, and then how to cope with the ever-changing HR technology landscape. And then finally, we'll wrap up the call with a bit of a forward-looking discussion on the future of HR technology. We'll be fielding questions from the audience if we have time at the end. And just so you know, this will be recorded. So we'll share that recording with people who have registered over the next couple of days. Before we start, I just wanted to say a genuine thank you to you both, Samia and Clayton, for your time. How are you both?
Very good, thank you.
Doing great. Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting us.
Amazing. So I can see, just looking to the right here, yep, I can see the numbers piling in, which is very exciting. So we've got a positive number of people in so far. So I'll kick off with the first question, if that's okay with you both.
Mhm.
Sure, let's go.
Amazing. So I'll start with Samia, and then Clayton for the same question. What makes global HRIS strategy unavoidable rather than optional?
Well, I think at this point right now it's quite impossible to not be efficient without one for so many reasons, and I'm sure Clayton will have good insight on this too. But I've worked with companies that would do double, triple, quadruple entries sometimes, creating a lot of mistakes, sometimes creating confusions as well. So I think having a strategy at this point, whether you're linking your systems, where your source of truth lies, all of that is so important. And just also choosing the softwares that will offer you what you need in terms of what your organization needs, and getting the flexibility that you might need is so important to evaluate that. Are we looking at a system that does it all, or do we need more specificities for certain systems? There's so much to think about when you really start looking into what is it that we need for our HR systems. It's very essential. It's also essential in terms of our compliances. We have a lot of compliances obligation. We see issues with data leaks and things like that in recent years. I think there's a big risk of exposing data if you don't have the right strategy as well. And that, for me, I put it all into the HRIS global strategy. But yeah, I'm very excited to hear what Clayton has to say as well about it.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's not negotiable, right? I try to compare these. Let's say you're going to do a road trip around the country. How do you want a road trip to be? Do you want it to be an adventure trip? Do you want it to be a family connection trip? Do you want it to be, a nature connection trip? Once you define that, then you define where you're going to stop, where you want to go, right? What are the stops that you're going to make? It's a similar thing here, right? So how do you want your HRIS strategy to be? Do you want to prioritize self-service, right? Do you want to consolidate data in a single place? How compliance is going to be? Data privacy is so important. You can't come up with those things as they happen, right? Oh, you had a data breach. Now let's think about data privacy. That's not how it works. So, and even though like a strategy could sometimes say, yes, there are words on a slide or words on a document, they should be your North Star. That's something that you should build collectively with your organization, with your HR organization, and your partners around the globe. So everybody understands why we are doing it, right? So if someone in France comes up with a new business process, they know that they have to think that that business process should be focused on self-service for the manager, self-service for the employee. Right? So they have that North Star. That makes things much easier. So people know when they come to you with their requirements or thinking, they know that we're going to start asking the questions that are tied to our strategy. And then everybody is going to kind of behave on the same way. Definitely, we make things much more aligned in my point of view. And from what Samia said, yeah, I think she also notices the same.
Yes. And Clayton, how do you balance that global standardization with local flexibility, local nuances? There's obviously quite a variation in terms of just local labor laws, data privacy laws. How are you sort of striking that balance in your global business?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, every country has their own legalities, etc. But I think what we need to look at is we have to start with a global standard, right? So if everyone in the country, every country in your organization could follow the same process, design that process, the simplest way possible, right? So once you design the process and you document the process, then you know when you go into the country, say, this is how compensation, this is how a promotion should work, right? This is how benefits should work. And then you know exactly when do you have to adjust the process to fit the legal requirement in the country. So that makes it easier for you to track, and it makes it easier for you to know, hey, you have a backbone, but you know where the nuances on that process are. But the second point that I'd like to highlight on that, based on my experience, like 2 organizations ago, I worked on a centennial company, right? So we always heard things like, oh, this is a legal requirement, right? We've been doing this for 30 years. I would encourage everyone to challenge that in a positive way, right? Really work with partners from your legal team and bring them along with you on that journey. A lot of the times, I would say at least 50% of those requests is not that need to not look at the legal requirement, but we could solve the legal requirement in a different way, in simpler ways, in a way that would keep our processes closer to the standard that we wanted, right? And it happens like, especially if you have like older organizations, things come like from a generation to the other. We've been doing this like this for many, many years. So that's the time. If you're doing a transformation, that's the time for you to sit with your legal team, with your local team, say, okay, what do we actually need to do to comply with the regulation or with the law, right? And focus on that instead of saying, oh, we've been doing this for 30 years, so we need to keep doing the way we were, right? So that's a strong recommendation that I give to all of you because I experienced that myself, and I'm not sure some if you had similar challenges too.
Yeah, definitely. And it brings me back to when we implemented our current HR system 2 years ago. And the way I decided to approach it is really to have some focus groups to begin with. And we're going to talk about it later, I'm sure. But my goal is really always to negotiate to keep things as similar as possible as well across board while respecting local requirements, obviously. But one thing I found really useful, so at Framestore, we're 3,000 employees. We're located in 8 different locations, 5 different countries. That gives them a lot of different laws. And one of my strategy to tackle that has been to have a super user in every location, in every country, that act as an HRIS ambassador in a way, so that when we're defining new processes or when a location asks to implement something new, I can turn around and look at my super users and say, hey, this location needs that. What does that look for you? And I can have an overview on the global process as well. Is this going to complicate my system to a point where I really like this would cause more issues than solve things? And work from there. And having those super users, in my opinion, is really key because they understand the system really well. I keep them trained. It's my network of super users. I keep them trained on the system. I make sure that they can access all of that. I'm sorry, I don't know. I think we can remove that. My husband, who's really sweet, trying to join us as well.
No worries at all.
But yeah, basically the super users are my key people. Like they're because they understand the system, they also understand what's going to create an issue. And that is really key in the process, because if they were not there, I think a lot of times there would have been processes that would have just goes through. But because they can advocate to their local stakeholders as well, they can say, hey, look, this is just going to complicate things. I think, Clayton, you tackled that a little bit as well, but sometimes I look, well, how can we tackle this requirement differently? Could it be tackled, let's say, in a payroll system? Because we don't have our payroll system. Yeah. Clayton's like, yes, payroll. Give that to payroll. So we do that a lot. I also try to challenge them between, like, is this a nice to have, or is this like a deal breaker? And I have my own list of deal breakers in my system as well. And so that's really how we process dealing with the differences.
Amazing.
I love the
Yeah,
ambassador piece. That's also a great way to have sort of some eyes and ears on the ground as well.
100%. Yeah, I really like what you both said. And I think you also touched upon that implementation piece, right, globally. I guess a question to you then, Samia, how do you approach vendor selection?
Vendor selection, I find my way. I created my own process, but basically the way I did work for that, I established our needs first. From my point of view, having developed the system before, I established what was our needs, and the way I did it, I looked at every ability that a system should have, and then I put a rating scale. Is it a low, a mid, or high? You could also do that with numbers if you wanted to have like a global rate, let's say per need. And my deal breakers. And my deal breakers were such a big focus. And I've done that in multiple vendor selection. And I like the more I've done it, the more I'm like, yes, you have to focus on those deal breaker. Because you will be in front of a lot of salespeople that will tell you, oh, yes, the system can do that. And so, yeah. So, and for deal breakers, if I don't see it in demo one, exactly how it's going to work, let me tell you, I will have as many demo as I need to make sure I understand exactly the day I have my hands in the system, how will I be processing those things. So that's the first thing, establishing our needs. Then defining the type of modules that I'm after. Is it just an HR data system? Is it a performance system that I need? Is it a compensation one? Just understanding that needs. And also understanding the needs of the other stakeholders within the organization. So having discussion with our technology team. What do you need for our integrations to our other system? Is there any security things that we need to look for? We put them in contact as well, usually with the providers, to ensure that we're at the right level for everything security. And then I also try to get on board some key people, even in the demos, that I bring on the journey with me. So I could bring a product manager, the project manager that will help us, and someone from tech that will make sure that it fits well in our product landscape at Framestore, and that and bringing them on board from the get-go really helps after when we go into implementation mode and we need a lot of support from tech, because they know why we're doing the project. They know why we selected the project. I don't have anyone coming and saying, wait, this doesn't work with our requirements or anything, because we've checked those requirements. And going back to the previous question, we also check requirements locally. So I created a focus group. I'm very big on focus groups, when we did the vendor selection as well, to check, okay, well, what is it that we need everywhere? And again, what's a deal breaker? What's a nice to have? What's a must have? And then every time I had a demo, before having the demo, I send my list of requirements to the vendor. That makes sure, like, that assures me that we're going to see all of my deal breaker. If not, then what are you doing? Like, I'm expecting the vendor to come up with like exactly showing me exactly how these are going to work. I expect them to adapt the demo to my list of requirements and what I'm after. If they're good salespeople, well, that's how you really define what's a really good salesperson and one that could improve. And so that also helps with not losing as much time as you could if you haven't done your work on that side. And then when I schedule demos, I make sure that I have my little focus group in the room as well. And we each have our list of our requirements and we rate every requirement that we've identified. And for that, I had a scale of things like doesn't meet the requirement, slightly under requirement, meets requirement, blah, 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 and unable to say. Maybe you haven't seen during the demo. And then when we look at our lists of unable to say, we can check, were these things that we really, really needed to see, or these deal breaker? And then if yes, then obviously I'll make sure that we get a second demo to tackle them, and things like that. So yeah, that has been really good for us in the past because it gives you final notes that you can use in your executive briefing as well. It gives you really good presentation to say, look, the systems that we've seen, this is how they compare, this is why we're going there. If you have stakeholders and you have a lot of people to report that data back to, it's a really good way to do it. So for me, it was the more data, the merrier at that point. And yeah, and as I said, like, one of the main thing I would say is make sure you address all of your deal breakers, all of them in big details, because if you get into launch phase and you realize that there's something that, it's just not working the way they said it was going to work, that can be a huge issue.
Yeah, 100%. And it just shows how robust you need to be with all of that stuff. Do you have a bit of a perspective, Clayton?
Yeah, I mean, Sammy covered everything that I would initially say. So I'll add some more other points here. I think the first one is, especially for a global company, you have to understand their global presence as well, right? So if they have like a large presence in the countries where your organization is present, that is already like something positive. So you know that they understand the local requirements, the local legalities. If you're going to speak to them about works council, they know what that means, right? So I think that's a positive sign for you to do your initial selection, right? The second one, you are not in this alone. Samia even developed her own process on how to select vendors, right? So a lot of your peers in the industry have done this before. So talk to your network as well, right? Talk to your peers either on the HR tech side or human resources side, or even your industry peers. Nowadays, it's very easy. There's no excuse for you to not reach out to others that are going through these or are using some of the tools or you're planning to use. And when I have these conversations, it's very interesting how people are transparent about it. Say, yes, the tool is great, but there's this thing here they're going to have a challenge with, right? Or that we had a challenge with. You learn so much from talking to your peers, and I would definitely recommend that, right? So you go with your eyes open before you start, going through the process to your own requirements. You know already where some of the challenges that you have. And then contract-wise, I want to talk about two things because I had, bad experience from my past on this thing. So understand the levers of the contract of the vendor that you're going to select. For example, if the vendor that you're going into it is a subscription model based on FTE, what happens if your company has a sudden growth? What happens if there is a sudden reduction? What happens if there is a merger or an acquisition or a divestiture? Those things need to be clear. You need to understand those things in, very, very deeply, because if it happens to you, it can be really disruptive to your budget, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So really understand that. Also understand how renewals work. Some of these platforms, and all of them, they want to get you in the door. So what happens after you are already in the building, right? When you're going to renew that? How does it work if you want additional modules or if you want to remove maybe some of the modules? You understand all of that, so you walk in and you say, yes, this is the right partner for us, but I also understand what's going to happen if our journey changes, right? And one thing that is very timely right now for us to talk about is the subscription or the cost model for most of these platform as a services or software as a services companies are changing because of AI. Salesforce recently announced, right? They're going away from one of the subscription model to go to a consumption model. AI is going to change that. So more of the vendors are going to go to a consumption model because you pay by the drink when you're using AI, and all the tokens they have to pay for it. Similar with Workday. Workday now is launching these flex credits. So once you go and say, oh yes, I have the subscription of the platform, but now I want to use all these cool new agents that are coming up, you're going to pay by usage. So you need to understand that. And that's something really new right now. It's very difficult for us on this side to understand and say, okay, if I want to use, give this payroll agent to my employees, what does that mean? What if they use 1,000 times every month or 500 times every month? How much am I going to pay? Those vendors are coming up with like calculators and things like that, but it's all very new. So you need to start. So it's difficult for you to budget that. So my recommendation, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to plan as we adopt those agents to start small and really understand what that means, right? And with that, start scaling on that. So keep an eye on it because the whole industry is changing because of AI.
Super interesting. Clayton, we get a lot of questions from HR leaders around what they should be doing with their data, how they should be using it. I know both you and Samia have people analytics as a component of your role. Um, what what's your recommendation? These HR leaders have more and more data every day. What should they be doing with that? What's sort of most insightful or useful from your experience?
Yeah, I think definitely you need to have a governance, right? Data, I think since 2 decades ago, people came up with that terminology that data is the new oil. Yes, it is. But as we start distilling that oil until it becomes gasoline, it's difficult to go back and say, oh, let me go back to the crude oil now because I have to fix some things because the gasoline is not looking as I expected, right? So you need to make sure that your data is accurate from the beginning. You have a governance around it, right? And it's something painful, right? Building a data dictionary is not something fun, right? And getting the data dictionary and going to all your regions and all your cities explaining what that is not also not fun, but it's very, very important, right? People need to understand what the data elements mean. And especially if you have different systems, a lot of them have different definitions, right? Cost center versus department versus superior organization. So when you aggregate the data, you're going to spend a lot of time in harmonizing, normalizing, et cetera, et cetera. So it's very important that everybody understand you have like a common language, a common data dictionary, and a common definition of the metrics, right? So if you come up with like your people analytics metrics for your organization, what does attrition mean? Or what is the formula that you're using? I had experienced this in my past when we had one of our countries using a different formula on how they calculated attrition versus what the other countries were using. And they were like, let's learn from them. They have like really low attrition. And then when we digged in, we noticed they were using a different formula. So it was not that, that good as apparently looked like. And another thing that is not so fun is really data audit. You need to make sure that you have an audit process on your data for sure. And so I'm not sure if you probably have experienced some of these challenges too.
Oh, definitely, definitely. And like just to add on what you said, because for me, I try to keep it to a minimal for data. Like I only try to gather data that I know we're going to use. I have sometimes manager who create their own data report where I'm like, okay, but that's nice that now like anything like demographics or that, but they don't use it after. They're like, oh, we have this, and it's like, but what are you going to do with this data now? So I try to make sure that we only gather data that we're going to use as well, because I don't want anyone to get lost, and I don't want me to get lost as well. And I want to make sure that it's clear to everyone involved as well what we're going to do with that data. Because at some point as well, I have some of our senior managers that are like, oh, but it would be good to know this and that insights on the company. But it's like, what are you going to do with that information? And how is it going to be perceived by the employees if we ask them for that information as well? I'm thinking, obviously, DEI data for some instances. It could be, I know that in some part of our recruitment process, we ask people about their caring responsibility, just to understand the background of people that are our candidates. But what are we doing with that data? I think that's really, really important, so that people still give us the trust to voluntarily give the information. Then obviously accuracy, you mentioned it, Clayton, regular checks. That's super, super important. And I only want to give access to users to the data on a need to know basis as well. Going back to compliances and things like that, I think that's extremely important to keep that line of conduct when we're giving permissions to data. Hopefully I'm still in the context of what to do with your data. So I'm thinking about it more from a permissions point of view, obviously. And then when I'm presenting data to senior managers and things like that, I try to start small and kind of try to understand what they're more interested in, what they're actually going to be using afterwards. I don't know for you, Clayton, but I receive a high number of reports on a weekly basis, and it's always almost the same reports but slightly different. And so I try to use those requests and keep them in my mind as the year goes by, to then make executive reports that kind of speak to what I've received throughout the year, so that I know it will be used and I know that that's what they're interested in. So this is kind of where how I manage the data. I really try to go from small and build from there.
Nice. Yeah, really relevant points. And I think that kind of gets me thinking on that global scale, how is it, I guess, to Samia, that you ensure that you've got that good quality data input when the inputs are coming from multiple countries?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, we do have some challenges, obviously, where clearly we're talking about definition of some of the data. We have some challenges where the lists need to be different. There's sometimes you need to have different data for a different location. So it can be difficult then to compare the data. Like for example, when we're looking at data on ethnicities. Well, like if we're talking about, I don't know, people of color, it's not going to be the same if we're talking about it in Canada as it is when we're talking about our Mumbai office. We need to compare with the local specificities. So for us, for example, we have lists that are built based on the government statistic list, because otherwise, what am I going to compare that with? If I come up with my own list, then how am I sure that my organization is representing the society that it operates in? So that's a way anyway that we do it. And then we make sure we compare apples to apples in every location. That's specifically for ethnicities, but obviously in other things, for example, for job titles, sometimes you have similar positions, but the job title is a little bit different. Then you can use a job structure so that you have your job profiles that will kind of relate to what the person is doing. And then the job title, you can go more specific. That's a good way to do that. When it comes to auditing, we do have some safeguards in place. I personally, there are some things in my system that are really important for me, like making sure my managers have offboarded people in the correct way so that they appear as offboarded instead of just running their contracts out or things like that. And so I do have some automated reports that I send to myself on a monthly basis just to check, and then I have some auditing that I delegate locally. They have their own things that are kind of really important for them, for the data to be good data. And I have some global stuff as well that I add to their list. So I basically provide them a list of like, I need you to check these things. I don't know, like our system doesn't automatically calculate hourly rate. There could easily be a human error of an hourly rate that is incorrect. So I make them validate them on a quarterly basis. That's for the whole organization. But then maybe in a specific location, they'll have an audit that's specific to their location as well. And that's how we've done it. Also, having a source of truth has been really important. We use our HRIS as the source of truth for most of the data, and then having a good HRIS strategy, again, that feeds a lot of our other systems. And that's how we kind of, I can't say we ensure, because obviously nothing is ever 100% perfect, but that's how we try to be as good as possible anyway. Yeah. Clayton, what about you on your side? What does
Yeah,
that
no,
look
I
like?
agree. I think you're extremely tactical there, and that is a good thing. Like you have to be tactical with data, right? You really need to look into the details. I have a process that is repetitive as well to make sure that you're validating, auditing all the time. What I would add, I mean, is pretty much like I said before, I really do the change management on those data definitions, right? So people understand that they are talking the same thing. It's much easier to harmonize if they are talking the same language, right? Yes, in this country, diversity means this. In this country, diversity means this. So we know there are different requirements for a diversity metric. So let's talk about that. But you're talking diversity, right? So I think that's an important thing. One thing that I think is very beneficial as well is like when you're using the data to build dashboards or insights, right, to your leadership, make sure you bring your country leaders into that conversation as well. So they see the result of their data in the overall picture. They will understand much better how important quality is, how important using the same standards are, right? They will become more accountable for it, right? They're going to say, oh, yes, I really need to make sure that my data is right, right? I need to make sure that I look at the reports before. And nowadays, with the technology, every system you can filter the quality of the data as the input happens in the system, right? If it's coming from the candidate, if it's coming from the employees, if it's coming from the manager, right? You can do a lot of those guardrails as part of the input. Sometimes it's not perfect, right? You can make sure an address is right all the time. So you do need to keep the guardrail behind it to keep that audit going on, right? So that's what I would add. But I think having your leaders understanding that, and even if you have different systems, they need to understand that, yes, when we are talking about, I don't know, attrition here and in the system, or I was talking about cost center here in the system, the other systems, once they see the results of the global, the overall thing in terms of metrics, they understand how important it is to make sure that they are already harmonized. So they're going to kind of harmonize it for you before it comes to you, because they know how important that's going to be for the final picture that will create the actionable insights. They're going to be used by their organization and their leaders to make decisions, right?
And Clayton, do you have any other advice for organizations on how to ensure that data quality, especially considering the global presence of your organization?
Yeah, I think that's it's not so sexy, right? Which is really having that audit process, right? So, for example, giving like a real example, we built like a set of audit reports that our HR operations run on a consistent basis, right? So they go every week and they run it, and if there's something that they see that is not going well, etc., we go ahead and fix them. We reach the employee, we reach the manager, or reach the organization, and we go ahead and fix that immediately. The other thing is I think it's important that you, as you generate insights, that you review those insights with people that you trust and people that are going to be picky. Like they're going to look at your data and say, where is this coming from, right? What are you using? And then you are able to explain that, because sometimes you're going to find say, oh, you're using this data. This data is not right, or this data is not what I meant, right? So really probe your own work, right? So do your analysis, etc., and then bring people to look at it and have them challenge. Because if you don't do that and you go in front of your C-level executives, they are going to do that. They will do that. So I think it's important that you rehearse and prepare yourself, make sure that everybody's looking at the same data and you can explain the data behind it in an easy way, and everybody will understand. Oh, okay, so this is the source of this data. Yes, I understand it now. I understand it's a good, trusted source. We have audit reports and make sure the quality is good. But like I said, it's a lot of work to make that be consistent and clean. So yeah, invest the time. It's definitely worth it. And I'm not sure, Sam, if you probably have the same challenges.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's true that you end up knowing who are your eagle eyes around the organization. I always get surprised by we have a team in Mumbai that I consider my eagle eyes, because they're really really good at spotting things and patterns, and they're definitely my testers on anything new. I remember when we switched from ADP to Bob, I kept having calculated vacations with a difference of like 0.03, 0.05. And I was like, I don't get like why, but it's so minimal that it doesn't matter. But they wouldn't let it go. And they were like, we need to like, no, like, and I think within a day they realized that it was like I can't remember the name in English, but the year where you have 366 days. And basically one system was considering that and the other one was just doing a 365. And I was like, wow. I would have spent days and nights on this for so long if it wasn't them. But them in a day, they were like, "That's the issue. That's right there. That's the calculation." So yeah, no, it's good to have these people around. Your eagle eyes, like whoever they are within the company, and if you can have one per location, that's not always the case, but yeah, I think I agree with you, Clayton. That's definitely, but yeah, as I said before as well, like auditing, auditing, auditing.
Yeah.
Nice. And I guess with all that complexity that's kind of come up so far, what's your advice for HR leaders who feel overwhelmed by all of that complexity and the pace of the change that's happening in HR technology?
Oh, I think you don't have to do it all right now. Like there's no pressure to be using AI everywhere in your business and to be excellent at it. I think you really need to start small and check what's your business priorities. I mean, my background is a generalist HR, and I'm a big fan of it depends. So just like look at what's your organization like. What are the urgent needs? Where can it add the most value? What do you have at hands already as well? Because as Clayton was saying before, like the landscape of HR systems is changing so quickly, and they're adding AI components here and there. Most organization or are adding AI components outside of their HR system as well, but that you can use for your processes. So I would say don't be overwhelmed, just start small. No one is expecting you to be and keep your essence as well. We tend to talk about okay, but like if you automate all of your processes, what will your coordinators be doing? And I feel like in a world where obviously it doesn't apply to every organization, every industry, but in a world where there's a lot more of remote work, it's a good occasion to create more human contact as well. And instead of processing and filing documents and processing, new starters and things like that, maybe you can spend 15 minutes more with the employees to discuss and things like that when people go on maternity leave, when people have a bereavement leave, maybe you can use that time differently. So I would say, yeah, look at as an HR team, what's your essence? What do you value and what do you want to keep? And then yeah, start small. Where can you use new technologies to help you and support you in building that essence? Yeah, Clayton, how are you on your side
Yeah,
doing with
well, I think you hit the nail on the head. Like you said, first take a deep breath. Yes, there's a lot of things happening, but also I think you have to be mindful that a lot of the companies are trying to catch up as well, and be in the AI world. This week, I don't know if you all heard that, but Allbirds, a shoe company, decided they're now going to be an AI company, right? So there's a lot of crazy things happening there. So I think you need to settle, come down and just look what your problems that you have that could be solved by AI, right? So we have this joint started from MIT and Stanford that say you have to start thinking as a product designer, a product manager, right? No, don't look at the technology, look at the problem that you have that where Gen AI can help you, right? And to some point, start small. The same study says that the companies that are successful in implementing AI, they start small. Select a workflow, start small, and always have that human in the loop. So you have the implementation of the use case, you have a human reviewing that, right? Giving feedback, you create that feedback loop where that process keep enhancing. So when you're confident with that, then you can move to the next one. And that is so important that you start with something. And you don't need to wait for the perfect tool or the next announcement. No, maybe use what you have. Sometimes you have in your company tool features in your existing systems already, or if you have a Gen AI tool like a Copilot or a ChatGPT or a Claude, you start with that because once you start, you understand what is happening, right? You understand what is happening in the marketplace because when you say, "Hey, I implemented," I tried to automate this process using, let's say, Claude or Copilot. Oh, but I found the limitation here, right? So now you understand how important the quality of your data is. You understand how important it is that everybody understands the process, right? What is the product of that process? What is the outcome? Because by looking at the outcome, using AI, you can revisit the process in itself, right? So we start small, like somebody suggests, I'm gonna, repeat myself 200 times on that because that's very important. Because then when something comes up, I say, oh, now we have this co-work feature, or we have these other features, and then you understand and say, oh, okay, so that problem that I had when I did this pilot can probably be solved by this problem. So you want to understand better that all these things that are coming up all the time, you're going to start filter those things better and say, okay, I need to pay attention to this, I need to pay attention to that, maybe I don't need to pay attention to this, right? I think that's the most important thing, and always keeping the human on the loop, because that's how you're going to create that feedback loop to improve whatever you want to do in terms of adopting these new technologies.
Clayton, I've a bit of a twofold question, but what does the next generation of HRIS professionals and HR analytics professionals look like, and also what is your advice to them in terms of advancing their career to your level?
Oh, I'm the one. I'm also looking for that answer. I think we all are, right? But one of the things that there's this recent Gartner study that came out is I think it's called "How AI is going to Change Organizations." Right, a very interesting one. I recommend everyone to search for it. I think that this study is saying like you have to start looking on making sure that your teams have versatile skills, right? That they can, probably manage multiple things at the same time, maybe different areas, etc. Why? Because today we have experts, right? You have some people on your team that are specialized in a certain area. So let's say I have someone in my team that the only job is configure compensation rules in the HRIS system, right? Because he needs to understand that deep down how it works and the dependencies, etc., etc. That's where the promise of AI is coming to say that they're going to take that burden away from us, right? Say, okay, you don't need probably to have that deep expertise, right? Because AI is going to help you with that. Or if you are doing that deep dive work, especially with data, we're talking about analytics that's even more impactful because you don't need those data crushes anymore, right? In theory, if you have your strategy, if you have your data standards, right, then Gen AI will be able to help you and surface those insights for you, right? So on the people analytics side, I think the skills are really going to move to be more strategic storytellers, right? Really looking at the actionable insights that are coming out of those tools and with the data that you have. And it's very important that you understand the business. So that's where the versatile part comes in, right? So you don't have to understand like, how data warehouses work, right? How Visier works or how people, so you need to be able to translate those insights to the business problems, right? And be able to tell that story. So I think that's the one big difference that I'm seeing to happen. And on the HRS side, similar thing. So you probably need to make sure that you understand everything around the HRIS system. Because if today you are an expert on an area, that's probably not going to be for so long. You need to make sure you're upgrading your skills, you're more versatile, because you will be able to support more in your technology architecture, right? Overall, because you're going to have AI and just help you with that. Organizations are also going to become flatter, right? Because you're not going to need all those levels anymore as work start being maybe delegated for AI. So you need to have people that you also, as a leader, you need to make sure that you're empowering your people to make decisions, because the center of gravity of decisions is also going to go down in the organization as the organization gets flatter. So you need to make sure that you have people that are empowered, and comfortable in making decisions as things happen. I think that's one of the things that I'm looking to make sure that people have that skill. And as we said, like, we have to take a big, deep breath with everything that's going on, but we always have to have that learning spirit, right? Really make sure that we are looking what's happening and learn. I think your teams as well. I love when I'm talking to curious people, and I'm curious as well. So we have the kind of productive conversation. They have different insights. They understand. So really make sure that your teams are having. Save some time to make sure your teams are talking to each other. They are understanding everything that's happening. Someone is coming and talking what they learned, right? I think it's a great time for us to collaborate in terms of understanding what's coming, what's happening, and where we can apply all these changes that are coming to our businesses.
So shift really from
Yeah.
sort of depth to more sort of breadth of skill
Yes.
as the market evolves. Interesting. Samia, what's your perspective?
Oh, I think Clayton said a lot of really important things on that subject for sure. One thing that sticks with me is the storytelling. I think that's absolutely non-negotiable for the next steps. Because with everything turning into AI and things like that, obviously, like I'm pretty sure most people on the call have used AI in some capacity. You definitely have to have that challenging bit because you can't just take it for what it says. You have to challenge it. And as Clayton said, you have to have a really good understanding of your organization, of the world that you're evolving in order to be able to challenge the AI and get the results that you need or the organization needs from it. So yeah, I think the story and then using that data and doing the storytelling is going to be really important. And as much as we're like, oh, everything is now, AI and very computer generated, we need to, as HRIS people, we need to go closer to the human centered in the sense that I think it's going to be extremely relevant to have the storytelling piece being able to speak to human. I mean, I think everyone on this panel anyway has not really grown up with like social medias and things like that. And the generation after us, I mean, it's proven, we see a lot of research around the fact that they struggle to communicate, they struggle to do that human interactions and these things. So I think that's going to be something that's going to come up more, and being able to storytell based on the data, be able to ask the right questions, and not be afraid to ask question and challenge is going to be definitely key. I think being solutions architect a little bit more, we already were, but it's going to become more and more because we see so many different systems now, and so being able to know what we need as a core, what do we need to extend within the platform, do we need to acquire something else and then integrate, being good solutions architect is definitely going to be key, being flexible as well, looking at the organization objective before the local ones, I think is also very important for our HRIS generation. And yeah, navigating gray zones in general. There's a lot of them. And so being able to navigate them in a world that's like full of data, like evaluating what matters and all of that is going to be really key, in my opinion.
We've certainly
Nice.
seen from our clients a demand for influencing skills, communication skills, stakeholder management skills, and then being able to sort of thrive in that ambiguity. So,
The
but certainly agree.
flexibility.
Mm. Yeah, it's honestly really good advice. And I think as we kind of not so much close off, but we've got a couple of fielded questions from the audience, which is great. We've got an engaged audience. So we'll move on to those two kind of, well, I'll pick two and I'll field those out to you guys. But I guess one last question before the fielded question, a bit of a different one. But is there a trend that you're watching closely that you think will reshape HR technology?
I mean,
Oh
AI,
yeah.
we're seeing it, right? I don't want to spoil anything for anyone here.
Yeah.
Yeah, fair
Uh,
enough.
yeah, Clayton, yeah, like,
Yeah, when we talk about AI, is not something new, right? If you talk, about machine learning technology, it's out there for the past 20, 30 years, whatever, right? What's different right now is generative AI is becoming much more accessible, right? So, and before 30 years ago, you couldn't train a model with the technology that we have, about how they
Mm,
can train a model today. So there's much more accessible. So that's the part that I'm really looking to how our employees start to use that. But what I was really looking for is the agentic stuff, right? Because now you
mm,
say, yes, you have all these great models, they are smarter, et cetera, et cetera. How can they get things done in a secure way, right? In a way that really is going to give you the outcome that you need without needing too much supervision. Of course, we always have to have the human on the loop. We're going to get into a point where we will not need the human on the loop because one of the trends that are coming out, you use AI to be your own judge, right? So let's say you put a process and you have AI in that process. You can use another AI to say, hey, look at this process and make sure that the outcome of this AI is working. So there's some crazy stuff coming up there. So those are the things that I'm trying to keep an eye on. Of course, there's still the basis. There's in my organization, we're walking, we're crawling, starting to walk a little on some of the things that we want to do around AI. But being aware of what's ahead, of these trends are, we're going to help me maybe make some decisions now. I say, hey, let's make sure that we have what we need for the future. And one thing that I had a conversation last week with someone, and even though sometimes you need to think about the future. So once you have agents in your future, if you don't have it today, those agents are going to rely on data. Think today, say, hey, I would love an agent in the future to do this. Do you have the proper data today for that agent to work in the future? Because if you start using data, AI or agents from data that you have from the past 3 months, past 6 months, it might not be enough for the agent to learn or do the right things. It might be biased data, right? So that's one of the things that I'm tracking too, is all the regulation and laws coming out as we're implementing some of these tools, really looking at bias testing, etc. But think about that. Think about the quality of the data now. Even if you're not using the data today, but you plan maybe some agentic feature in the future, think about how you can start collecting the data now. And of course, regulations, it's always there. You always have to keep an eye on it. So that's something that I'm also looking at.
Nice. Yeah, I like both of your points about AI, and like you say, it's that kind of using AI responsibly, which I think, yeah, a lot of organizations are going to be thinking about. Um, so I guess just to move on to the fielded question. So, one of the listeners, Louisa, really liked your point, Samia, and the question is to both of you guys, about super users. Um, so Louisa has said they're a step before that, whereby they're about to implement a new HRIS globally, but they don't have super users yet. So the question is, how can I apply this principle at this stage where people are yet to learn the new system?
So the way I approached it anyway was that when we were selecting vendors, I had locally someone who was just considering the points that I was making with the abilities, confirming that that was working for the location. And when we did the implementation, I made sure that they were kept in the loop on how everything is built, the super users. So that's how these users became super users. Well, they were not even users; they became as super users as we launched. So basically just having them from the get-go, and the way we install, the way Bob works anyway, and I'm not sure which system you're implementing, but the way Bob works is that they do enablement session on every piece of the software, and it's the client that kind of builds the system. So it was very easy for me to either have the super users there in the sessions or watch the recording after, or I cut them up on the subject. So that's how I tackled that. Clayton, do you have super users in your organization?
Not today. Actually, you were giving me good ideas here, Sam. So thank you for that. No, I mean, in my past, we did had like we do have in our organization what we call cultural ambassadors, which kind of people that we rely on. I can't call them super users, but they are the ones that we bring in before, like I said, we launch something or we get their opinions on. But they really are you're similar to the ambassador part, but the super user part that you have, I think they're much more committed, right? To that they have a responsibility on that, and I like that approach. So yeah, it's a really good one. I recommend Louisa for you to follow. What's Sonia recommending?
Nice. And then the last fielded question is from Corey, to both of you. Can you give examples of ways you practically address adjusting the global process for the local nuance or compliance requirement? And the context Corey has given is my team is building out a global process right now and starting to document the local requirements. So I guess it's just examples of how you practically address adjusting global processes for local nuance.
Yeah, I can probably start with that. But first, good luck, Corey. It's not an easy part. It's not an easy job doing what you're doing. Uh, but I would not, I would split those things. So when you say, how do I adjust my global processes for the local nuances? The way I've seen in the past, and I think we're like the global process is an entity in itself. And the global process are usually defined by the global process owners, right? From a strategic perspective, like I said, how do I want compensation to work overall across the organization? I want to pay for performance. I want to involve skills as part of the compensation, as part of the promotion process, right? That is kind of a sacred thing. That's your global process. Then you were going to look into that, and then you're going to go to your local country and say, okay, this is the process. This is the process that our company wants to do. What do we? Is there anything else? Is there any legal requirement that we have to comply here? Oh yes, in my country, you need to have 3 levels of approval on a promotion. Okay, and then you document that piece, right? So you have like your global processes, and then you document the global nuances. In the system itself, it's straightforward for you to do that. Okay, if this country is Netherlands, then you know you have to send another approval. But the important part is that you do not open the door for the country to say, oh yeah, let me change the global process because you need that. The global process is the global process. Document separately the nuances that needed for those processes. And we are talking legal requirements here, and I don't want to be naive. Sometimes there are local market practices as well that you have to consider, right? For example, in Europe, it's very common for countries to give a car allowances, right? Which is not some common in the US. We know that. So that's something that you need. But again, for the overall process, you probably don't have that, but you know that you have to document those things. And as you document the requirements, sometimes different countries, especially Europe, sometimes they have similar requirements as well, and then you can join them in a single. But keep my recommendation, keep your global process one, and then you just document the nuances, not opening the door for people to change the global process. That hopefully answer your question, Corey.
Yeah, I agree with you, Clayton. And additionally, the only thing I could add to this is it really depends. I'm back with my it depends. Because it really depends on your system sometimes as well. Some systems will offer so much more flexibility. And typically when we did our vendor selection, we know, and jumping on something you said earlier, Clayton, about need the flexibility sometimes, and you know, adapting the system, the having a system that can follow the direction that your organization goes when you know that your organization might be changing. I know that, for example, we work on projects, so we have a lot of new hires, leavers, new hires, because we're a project-based organization. And so we needed flexibility when it came to processes like new starters and things like that. And so adapting this to local, it really depends. If you find out that your local requirements can be translated into certain systems ability, make sure that the system has those abilities. If it's building a process that you can then condition based on the location, then make sure your system can do that.
Amazing. Thank you guys so much. I think that brings us to time. Yeah, just looking at the clock, we got through a lot. So well done, guys. Um, yeah, thank you so much for your time today. I kind of enjoyed how you both talked about the complexities that's available, which can be daunting, I'm sure, for everybody that's on this call, but you've remedied those and given really, really good advice on how to get through all of those tricky parts of a system. Um, as discussed, we'll be doing some great write-ups of the topics discussed today. And we'll be sending out recordings and certain clips on our social media. So thank you so much, both, and thank you to the audience for joining us today, and thank you, Brad, for co-hosting.
Thank you
Thank you,
so
Clayton.
much.
Thank you, Samia.
Thank you. Have a
Have a
great
good day.
day.
Cheers.
Thank you, everyone.
See
See you.
Have a great
Bye-bye.
day.
Bye.